If nothing else, I just do not want to screw this up. Does that sound familiar? Well, my friend, today we are going to start this journey. Together we will hopefully avoid many of the pitfalls that I have hit over the years building and painting 1/35th scale figures, and the techniques I use to help you get a great result first time, even if this is the very first set of figures you have ever built. What people often do not realise is that this is probably the single biggest contributor to that feeling of paralysis or not wanting to start for fear of screwing it up. Now, the very first thing you need to be aware of is that you're about to go down the rabbit hole here. But it's your choice how far you go. How to describe this? Hold on. Now, to show you what I mean, imagine you're wandering along in the countryside and you spot a magical modelling rabbit hole disappearing into a sunlit grassy bank. Now, magically, as you approach the tunnel entrance, you shrink to size and you decide to explore. Now, the first chamber you come to is where you can make the kit straight out of the box, using the instructions or the box art as a painting guide. It is a pure rule of cool situation, and the key consideration is what looks great to you. But then you notice a tunnel going down that leads to another chamber. Now, in this chamber, you're still building the kit out of the box, but you want to build the figures into a diorama or a vignette. If you don't know what those are yet, then don't worry about it. We will go into that later. But in this chamber, while your painting is still led by the rule of cool, you're using your imagination to set the figures in a particular setting, in a particular environment. So you might choose to change the colours to make them slightly warmer or colder, depending on the conditions that you're trying to convey. Now, once again, the end result looks great, but then you notice another little tunnel leading out of the back of the chamber. Now, in this one, you want to make something as historically accurate as possible. But do you want to keep your build as out of the box and focusing on accurate colours? Or do you want to upgrade equipment with third-party parts? Now, even with newer sculpts, model kits can have equipment or weaponry in the sculpt that was not even issued during a certain time period. So, for example, the uniforms and weapons could be very different between the start and the end of World War II. And model kits can sometimes mix these up. So having bits of kit from the start of the war period and weapons from the end of the war period on the same model. It may look cool, but it might kind of not quite work for you. So this leads into a deep, bewildering, twisting mass of tunnels of research. So first you need to recognise that this is a rabbit hole you can completely vanish down. But you also need to recognise that you only need to explore the chambers that you want to. Now, if this is your first kit, I personally would recommend only exploring the first chamber or two. This gives you a few things. One, it stops you from getting overwhelmed, which can stop you from getting started in the first place, that kind of analysis paralysis. Two, it gives you the opportunity to learn the foundational skills without trying to match those photorealistic results of that incredible artist that you saw on social media, who, unlike you, has been researching and practicing a certain subject for decades. And three, it helps you to receive and give feedback constructively. Now, there will always be that guy who will point out that you used the wrong shade of green for a certain time period, or the weathering is too much or too little for a particular setting or time period. But that is fine. The level of detail they are talking about is appropriate for where they are in the warren of modelling tunnels. Now you can recognise that you are both in different areas of the same modelling warren. Both places neither good nor bad place to be. And then tuck that little gem of information or feedback away for another time, for when you want to explore that part of the warren. Okay, so what is the best way to build your first scale model figures? Well, we have decided that in this project we are going to build a small diorama using these Tamiya World War II US Army infantry for our first scale module project. For this particular project, we're going to build this plastic kit straight out of the box and use the box art as the painting guide, maybe with a little inspiration from films like Saving Private Ryan. Basically, we're just going to have some fun with it. Now, this particular kit was released over 50 years ago and therefore comes with certain challenges compared to newer kits. But it is still great fun to build and paint. So if we can get a good result with an old kit like this, we can progress to newer kits in due course. So as usual, this video is not sponsored in any way. But if you like the look of a bit of kit that I'm using, then I've put a full resource list with links where you can check them out for yourself down in the comments. Now this kit is the Tamiya 1/35th scale US Army infantry set. In this box are 2 sprues to make up 4 soldiers. Now they are in fairly dynamic poses and the detail looks pretty good for a plastic kit that is over 50 years old. But what is interesting is that the heads are sculpted straight onto the body. Now with some newer kits, then the heads are separate, which can help with painting as well as allow you to easily swap them out for a third-party option if you wanted a different expression or a fancy moustache or something. Also worth noting is that there are no water transfers or decals or decals depending on where you are in the world. So if you want to include rank or unit patches, you'll have to freehand paint these. But that is a challenge for another time. In the box is also a brief set of instructions, which in this case are all in Japanese, but the pictures are pretty self-explanatory. Next, look at the instructions. Now, all different manufacturers tend to use different symbols, so it's always worth taking a few minutes to get your head around these in your particular kit. It can save you plenty of headaches down the line. For example, a part may have 2 numbers pointing at it. One could be a part number, which you will find the corresponding number on the sprue, and another could be relating to the colour that it should be painted. Now, I will neither confirm nor deny that I have spent at least 30 minutes looking for a part across multiple sprues to later realise that it was actually a paint reference number. This is also a chance to plan, in your head at least, any sub-assemblies you may want to make painting easier. But we'll come back to that later. So first of all, we need to remove the parts from the sprue. Now whether you are using the hobby knife or the side cutters to remove the parts from the sprue, you want to cut the sprue close to the part but not directly next to it, as that can cause stress marks in the plastic, which will give you even more things to tidy up later. However, especially for small bits, take care so it does not ping off across the room, as you could be looking for it for ages. There will always be some tidying up to do, whether you're working on a plastic, metal or a resin model. During the casting process you have 2 parts of the mould which come together. Especially on resin models, you can get a very fine layer of resin or plastic squeeze out between the 2 halves of the mould. This is known as flash and just needs carefully trimming away. But more common is a mould line, which is a very slight ridge in the plastic where the 2 halves of the mould come together. This can be tidied up on the flat surfaces fairly easily, but it does absolutely suck when the mould line goes straight through a load of fine detail, and that takes more work to try and rectify. But to tidy up a mould line, you can either use the flats of a hobby knife blade or a metal file to take the worst of it off. Just be careful that you're not carving a big flat surface into the model or carving away or removing any of the finer detail. You can also use a range of sanding blocks to make that ridge flush with the surface. Once you've tidied up the mould lines and the flash, etc., it is often a smart move to dry fit it together before you get the glue out. Or in other words, assemble the model dry or without glue. This allows you to see how it goes together or make any adjustments if it does not fit quite right. For example, a part might need a bit more sanding to make it fit properly. Then when you are happy, apply a small amount of plastic glue to one side, give it a couple of seconds and then press the 2 halves together, making sure that it is in the right position. So with plastic cement you will have a few more seconds of working time compared to super glue, for example. But after a few seconds you'll have a pretty solid joint. Now remember, you can glue everything together before you even think about getting the paint out, but dry fitting also allows you to figure out if you need to use sub-assemblies. This is a very much a personal choice and is also a balance of risk. Having everything glued in one place can make getting to a brush in there to paint things near impossible, meaning you may end up with a paint job you're not happy with. Now although it does take a bit more planning, you can paint in sub-assemblies and then figure out what you can paint as you add things to the model. It really is down to you, and being fair, that knowledge will grow as you gain experience with it. Okay, so we have prepped and built the miniature figures, or at least created your sub-assemblies. Therefore, before we move to the priming stage, it is often useful to mount the model or sub-assemblies ready for painting. This makes things a whole load easier to handle when priming and painting, and also reduces the chance of getting a great big thumbprint right in the middle of a freshly painted area. To do this, I get some wire, which you can get from model shops, but alternatively you could use a straightened out paperclip. Then select a micro drill bit that is appropriate for the size of the wire that you want to use. What you're looking for now is a place that will not be visible once the model is complete. Then it's just a case of very carefully drilling a hole about 3mm deep. When you're doing this, be careful to ensure that you do not go straight through the model and out the other side, or into your finger for that matter. Once you've done that and you glued the wire in place, you can then put a bend in the wire or push it into a cork to make it easier to handle. Personally, I much prefer using a painting handle like this one, where I can push the wire into a little hole on the painting handle head. Then it's easy to snap the parts I want to paint onto the main painting handle, which I find much more comfortable and easy to control. Okay, time to start playing with some paint. Now, after priming the model, a top trick is to use this. But why on earth would you want to paint a World War II US infantry soldier dark blue? Well, in this video right here, I'll go into why this might be a really good idea for you, as well as looking at how you can get a great paint job on your very first scale miniatures. And I'll see you there.